Paige Connell is a working mother of four who shares relatable content on TikTok and Instagram, highlighting the everyday experiences of women who are balancing motherhood, careers, and relationships. Paige is known for her candid insights on the mental load of motherhood and the challenges of creating equity at home and work. Her content resonates with millions. Paige also advocates for affordable childcare, paid leave, and reproductive rights, sparking important conversations about what families need to thrive. Her impactful voice and relatable storytelling have led to features in Scary Mommy, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and more. Paige, welcome, and let's get ready to talk about the invisible load.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to you because you know so much about the struggles that women have when it comes to careers and childcare and balancing it all and this mental load. I want to start off by talking about what do you mean when you say the mental load?
Sure. So people will describe the mental load differently, and there's different terms people will use, like cognitive labor, for example. But the way that I think about the mental load is it's everything you need to know, do, and remember for your family, whatever that dynamic looks like. And it's the never ending to do list in your brain. And the thing about this to do list is that it never gets shorter, it only gets longer. You check off the laundry, and now you add two things. You need to order new pants for your son, and you've run out of detergent, right? This list is always getting longer and never shorter. And it's in your brain oftentimes, right? It's this invisible list that you are keeping track of. And the mental load is a term that most women understand and recognize because typically they're the person carrying the mental load. And the mental load is very different than a task, for example. I like to make that clear. Making dinner is not the mental load. The mental load is keeping a running inventory of all the food in your kitchen, what's about to expire, the fact that you need to buy more ketchup, your daughter only eats cheddar, and this other daughter only eats mozzarella, right? It's that running list in your brain of knowing and doing and remembering all of these things. That's the mental load. It has nothing really to do with the act or the task of cooking dinner, for example. And so that's how I like to think about the mental load.
I saw some content that you did on lunches for kids
Yeah.
who go to school. And it's like, do we do school lunch or do we pack lunch for the kids? And this is a different decision that's typically made depending on whether mom is responsible for lunch or dad is responsible for lunch, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's funny. I made that video, right, where I said making lunch is not the mental load, but this is what it is. And I said, for this kid, I have to cut the grapes, and this kid can't have nuts, and this kid has this, and this kid has that. And I went through all of the things. And like, actually, this is the last grape, so I have to add them to the grocery list. It's all the things that you're thinking about as you make students their lunch. And I got a lot of comments on this video, especially on TikTok. From women who had this experience with their dads, where when dad was in charge of lunch, he would send them either with not enough food, he would hand them money, he would send them something they're allergic to, like all of these crazy comments, right? Where when dad was in charge of lunch, he would do kind of the bare minimum, and mom would put thought and care into what she's putting into lunch. And I think oftentimes this is a dynamic that can exist in so many different areas within a home where men think about these tasks high level. What do I need to do to achieve or check this off a list? As opposed to what's the additional layers to this? I cannot send my kid with peanut butter and jelly because the school does not allow peanut butter because kids are allergic to it, right? And so it's knowing all of that information, or the fact that one of my daughters is in a classroom where they can't have any egg product, right? There's a kid with an egg allergy. These are all the things that we know when we pay attention to and are the mental load of doing the lunch, for example.
Okay, so we talk about the mental load, but
Mm.
then there's the invisible load. How does that
Okay.
differ?
So I think about them, they're kind of the same and they're kind of different. There's invisible labor, right? Invisible labor is often the work that is either invisible, you actually cannot see it, and or not valued. So it doesn't mean it's invisible that somebody can't see it, but it's not valued. For that, I like to think about the laundry, for example. I work from home, so I tend to fold one load of laundry a day for our kids. In theory, this is invisible to my husband. He can come home. He doesn't see the laundry getting washed. He doesn't see it being folded. He doesn't see it being put away. He gets to reap the rewards and the benefits of the laundry being done, but it's invisible to him. And without seeing that work or being accountable to it or acknowledging its value, it remains invisible, right? And oftentimes these tasks, this invisible labor, gets written off as easy. It's easy. It's not valuable. How hard is it to fold the laundry, right? But when you're folding 7 loads of laundry a week, it is actually a lot of work. And so there's that invisible labor. Invisible labor is the work that's happening behind the scenes that often is either not seen or not valued. And the mental load falls into this invisible labor. It's all of that work that you're doing in your brain that nobody else is seeing. It is still work. It is still valuable, but it is often dismissed. And so that's the thing about invisible labor is it's not actually just that mental to-do list. It can be physical tasks like the laundry, like sweeping the floor. But if somebody doesn't see it or if they're not accountable to it, they just benefit from the end result and they don't actually place value on the work that went into that labor.
But Paige, you're at home all day. How hard is it to throw in a load of laundry? Like, that's not really work anyway, right?
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the often what is positioned in this conversation of invisible labor in particular is that it's all easy. And individually, all of this work is easy, right? And oftentimes men will say, well, I'll do the laundry if you mow the lawn, or I'll do the laundry if you change the oil in your car. And it's this idea that the work that women do is easy. And yeah, some of it is. Folding the laundry is not very hard. It doesn't take a lot of mental capacity, right? Or even time sometimes, but it is constant. It is never ending. Is relentless. It is always, always happening. And the second the laundry is done, there's more dirty laundry, right? It is always happening. It is never done. You can mow the lawn and know you are not going to have to do it again for a week. You can take the trash out for 5 minutes and know you're not going to do that again for a week. Those tasks are not the same as the invisible labor that tends to keep a home functioning every single day because they are constant. They're always happening and they're never ending. And I think as we think about this in the context of children, it is not as though it increases twofold with a child. It's like 10x the amount of work, right? It's not like you go from unloading the dishwasher once a day to twice. Sometimes it takes the laundry from 1 load to 6. And that is often ignored, which is like, you always did the laundry. Well, the laundry has become exponentially more work now that we have children.
Well, as you know, I make content for women. And so on social media, when I'm doing videos for women about the finances and how things work out in the marriage and stuff, I get so many comments from men about how the women just sit at home all day long. Or
Mhm.
how hard it is it to do a few chores around the house. I do the lawn, I change the oil, and I say, yeah, great for you. You do an occasional chore. Great
Mhm.
versus she is doing these chores all day long. This concept, though, that someone is sitting around all day really never fails to get me worked up because it's just not the reality. And I don't understand why so many men think this way. Certainly, we're generalizing, right? But if we put percentages to this, there is a very, very high percentage of men who think this way.
Yes, and the data shows that women do the bulk of this work, right? Women, even when they're the breadwinner, do the bulk of the childcare and the domestic labor and the mental load. And so women are essentially doing what's called the second shift, right? They work a full-time job and then they come home and do a second shift. So even when they're not a stay-at-home parent, they're still doing this work. They are finding time to do this work. And in this like context of a stay-at-home parent, I was laid off a few months ago and in that time, I was at home, right? And I was doing all these things. And people were saying, what are you doing with all of your free time? And I said, what free time? I'm just as busy as I was before. Now I'm just not working on my computer till midnight, right? Like
Right.
I'm no longer answering emails all day long and taking calls. I'm just doing all of the other work I was doing during the day. It is nonstop. And I do this series where sometimes I'll vlog my day and I'll say, I'm on a mission to make invisible labor visible. And I'll show you all the things that I've done all day. I don't sit down. Sometimes I don't eat my breakfast until noon, right? These days are incredibly full and busy. And oftentimes we are expecting women to do this alongside providing full-time childcare for children, which is incredibly draining and exhausting and unpredictable, right? You might think you're going to have nap time and then you don't because they don't nap. And so you don't have time to cook the meal or to fold the laundry because you have a crying toddler who doesn't feel good, whatever it might be. Doing both of those things is essentially 2 full-time jobs, right? Which is why we pay so much for childcare because childcare is a full-time job. And so I don't know any woman who is sitting at home doing nothing. Even if her kids are in full-time school and she's at home full-time, they are busy during those hours doing all of this invisible labor. There is truly no end to the amount of work required to manage a home and to raise children.
Well, when you mentioned free time, it got me to thinking about how we view the time of men versus the time of women. And I know that the statistics show that men in marriages where there are children, the men have much more free time than the women do. And we treat the men's time as something that must be protected, right? And they
Yeah.
need their free time. Whereas for women, we treat it as if it's like this limitless resource that never runs out.
Yeah. I think it's also the way we position things, right? We know that there's a leisure gap. We know that there's a fitness gap, right? Men have more time for things like hobbies. Men have more time ultimately. And I think some of this too is positioned in the way that we view men and women and their time. Women, if they were to take an hour to go work out in the middle of the day and pay a babysitter, she's selfish, right? Like, why is she doing that? Why is she paying for that? But if a man uses his lunch break to work out, that's fine. He's using his time wisely. Why wouldn't he do that? Mind you, he needs childcare in order to have that lunch break, right, without children. And so we position it in two very different ways. But also, even the way that we condition women to show up, that their time is in service of everyone else. When you have children, there's this running joke that women have to ask permission to shower. Right? Like every mom will be like, yeah, I have to like ask my husband, like, can I go shower now? Can you watch the baby? Because we are taught as women, like, grocery shopping by yourself is a luxury. If you don't have to bring your kids, like, that's a day off. Men will go golf on a Saturday for 6 hours, and that's his time off, right? They're treated vastly differently. So not only is it about like the actual time that we have, but the way that society views men and women and what's appropriate, right? If a woman were to have a hobby that took her outside of the home on weekends for 8 hours on a Saturday, she would be shamed for doing that. Why don't you want to spend that time with your children? But for men, he deserves that time to unwind and to relax and to be with his friends. Why are we always trying to ruin their good time, right? So I think there's a huge issue with time equity. Men and women don't have similar amounts of time to spend on themselves because women are doing so much more of the work required to manage a home and a family.
Well, and I see men telling that they're going to go do the thing and women asking, can I go do the thing? So
Mhm.
lots of inequities there. But why do women seem to find it so difficult to advocate for themselves in these
Yeah.
situations?
There's a lot of barriers, right? When we approach this conversation, there's a lot of barriers for women. When we enter into these marriages with men in particular, we also have to come up against societal barriers like lack of paid leave, lack of childcare, lack of supports for families, all these things, right? Which disproportionately, again, impacts women. And so we have that. We have the societal barriers that we're dealing with. Then we have these or those are systemic barriers, essentially. We also have these societal barriers where we've told men and women what it looks like to be good partners. And in order to be a good dad, you have to be present, right? The expectations are very low. You just have to be there, essentially. Like, dad's at the soccer game, yay, dad. Mom's at the soccer game. She had to wash the uniform, bring the ball, coach the team, bring the snacks, all the things. And then she's like an okay mom, right? So the expectations are very different. And when we approach these conversations with our partner, what often happens, the number one thing that women will say is that their partner is defensive. He's defensive. Am I not? You're telling me I'm a bad dad, I'm a bad husband. It's like this shame spiral and this defensiveness and this anger that comes out because they're doing so much more than their dads did. I'm doing more than my dad ever did. And you're telling me it's not enough. I'm never enough. I can never do it right. I can never do this. This is what most women will tell you is the hardest thing about having this conversation is it almost always ends up in a fight. It ends up in a fight. And then they feel like they just go round and round in circles and it's just quote unquote easier to do it themselves. And so then nothing ever gets resolved. And what ends up happening is women resent their husbands and they resent their marriage and they're no longer happy. And the running joke that my wife left me because I didn't empty the dishwasher is not a joke, it's real. And it's not about the dishwasher, it's about the years of what is perceived as disrespect and being unseen and unvalued within a relationship, which is ultimately how women end up feeling when they carry the bulk of this work.
Well, one of the things that I hear from my clients is that even in the relationships where their husband is doing more in the household than traditionally has been done by men. So he's more considered to be a good husband in that
Right.
regard. What I'm hearing them say is the language that we use is interesting. He's saying, well, I help my wife all the time around the house. I help with all
Mhm.
sorts of things. Well, you're not supposed to be helping. It's equally your responsibility. But my real favorite one is just tell me what to do. If she just make a list, if she just tell me what to do. And it's like, why do I have to tell you what to do? Are you not an adult who can
Mhm.
see there are things that need to be done?
Yeah. Yeah, the make me list one is infuriating for most women because it's just asking them to do more work. And oftentimes, what you'll hear is that they make the list and then their partner doesn't do the list and they have to remind them 10 times. And then they remind them, and the husband says, well, you're nagging me all the time. Get off my ass, essentially, right? And so it creates this unfair dynamic where women are placed in this position where not only are they accountable for all of these things, but they're responsible for them too. And they're essentially like, the project manager, and they're project managing their partner who's supposed to be a partner, not an employee, right? And so it creates this really yucky dynamic that women don't enjoy. We don't want to have to create a list for our partner and then remind them 10 times to do something, right? That's what we do for our 6-year-olds. We don't want to do that for our partners. And so it creates this dynamic, and men often don't see all of the work that goes into making that list. And that even that list, going back to the beginning of this conversation, I can give you a list of tasks, but it's not just the task. If I have to tell you what to make for dinner and then you use up all of the salt and you don't tell me, now we don't have salt for next week, right? All of these things play into each other. And if your partner takes on a task, but not all of that invisible labor and mental load that goes into the task, it's not actually very helpful, right? Like I don't mind cooking dinner, but all that other stuff, that adds up to a lot of work and time, and that is what creates the resentment. And so men are like, I don't know what you want from me, right? Like, I'm telling you, I'm going to help. And women are sitting here saying, I don't know how to get you to understand that it's not just this task I need help with, it's everything that goes into the task.
Okay, so when we have this unequal distribution of domestic work and emotional labor, that's a term that I've learned recently. It's like, yes, emotional labor
Yes.
in the relationship. When it's unequal, how does that impact the mental health of women, their self-worth?
Yeah. A lot of women are burnt out. That is the number one feeling. I think most women feels burnt out. They are exhausted. And they will express feeling as though nobody cares about them, right? Like nobody really cares about me and my well-being and my health and my happiness. And it can feel like everything you do isn't valued, right? And so that's not great. That doesn't promote healthy mental health, right? You don't feel good in those instances when you feel like you're being taken advantage of in a relationship or disrespected in a relationship. And this can also be hard because I think women have been somewhat conditioned to believe that they're asking for too much. And so then they feel a lot of guilt and shame for expecting more, right? They feel badly for wanting their partner to do more for them. And then they're told that they're asking for too much. So it just leads to this internal conflict that can be really unhealthy or difficult to walk through as women. And so, also, sometimes certain mental health things will be weaponized in these instances where they'll say, you're just really anxious about everything. You have anxiety. And it's not necessarily that women are anxious or have anxiety. It's that they are the ones ultimately responsible for these things. And so they're coordinating in the event of certain things happening. And so it might look like anxiety to their partner when in reality it's preparation. It's that mental load, that work, and that emotional labor, right? Of knowing that if you skip nap, your toddler is going to be a mess in 2 hours, and then you're going to have to try and regulate them and figure out how to calm them down. And it's kind of shoring yourself up against all of these things that happen.
But Paige, your husband helped with things and you weren't even appreciative. Like you didn't even seem thankful that he did some things around the house.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is a big one. The idea that men need a medal for like taking out the trash, right? This idea that they want to be thanked and appreciated for showing up in this work. And I do think that thanks and appreciation are incredibly important for both people, right?
Sure.
If we're not thanking mom for making breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day, and we're not thanking mom for buying the kids new shoes when they grow out of them, and we're not thanking mom for signing them up for soccer and for ballet and all of those things, it feels really frustrating, right, to women to have to congratulate their husbands on achieving a small task when they're still doing the bulk of the work, right? And so it has to be reciprocal. There has to be equal respect and appreciation. And so I think that's a missing piece. And sometimes women will say on their end, I just need appreciation. I just need to hear a thank you. I just need to hear acknowledgement of this work. And for some people, that is enough. And I think in this conversation, it's really important to think through your own life and your own dynamic and think, what is it that I want? Do I want an equal partner? Do I want my partner to appreciate and acknowledge the work? Do I want my partner to participate more? What do I need? What am I looking to achieve? Because oftentimes I think without that end in mind, it can be difficult to have these conversations because we end up fighting about something like the trash when really it's about feeling unseen or underappreciated or feeling like your partner's not doing enough. But without being able to distinguish that, we often can't have productive conversations.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. If I'm a man listening to this and I listen to the last 20 minutes of us going back and forth, I'm going to walk away from this saying, all you two did was sit there and bash men and say that they're not doing enough, right?
Some men will feel that way. I think it is, I think that is a somewhat of a defense mechanism. When I talk about equity, I don't necessarily mean 50-50. Nothing will ever be 50-50 in a relationship. It's impossible, right? It can't be 50-50. Sometimes my career is more demanding. Sometimes his career is more demanding. Sometimes we have different needs at different times. My health is struggling, for example, when I'm pregnant, right? I need more from him during those times, and other times he needs more than me. And so when I talk about equity, it's about looking at our homes and thinking, is this fair? Does this feel fair? Do I have much more free time than my partner? And does that feel fair? Do we want each other to be happy? Right? I think this is a missing piece. Oftentimes, men will say, like, you're just asking me to do more work. What do I get out of this? But if you're in a relationship, both people deserve to be happy. And I can promise you that if you have a more equitable division of labor, your relationship will benefit from that. Your partner will be happier. It will free up time, her time and your time to spend together, to spend with your friends, to spend on hobbies, to no longer have a partner who's overburdened by the amount of work it takes to manage a home that like relieves space and time and resentment. It creates for a happier, thriving home that works like a well-oiled machine. But when one person's doing it, right? That takes away that time and that opportunity for connection. And what I think a lot of men miss oftentimes is when somebody's overburdened by this work, they don't have time and space to think about date night. They don't really want to connect with you. The intimacy suffers. All of these things suffer when somebody is burnt out and resentful. And so this conversation is not meant to be like, men, you're awful, you don't do anything. It's if we want to have healthy, happy, thriving marriages, then we have to think about what it takes to achieve that. One person cannot feel taken advantage of in that situation.
We have to be intellectually honest about the state of things as they are
Yes.
now. So
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what are some strategies, some things that couples can do to get started on creating a more equitable relationship and really sharing that mental load?
Sure. So I think a couple of different things. I think it's really important to find the words to articulate all of this. I think that is where most people struggle, is being able to actually have a conversation without it becoming a fight about the dishes, for example. And so having the words, reading Fair Play, reading books like Emotional Labor by Rose Hackman, reading these things will help you be able to articulate what's happening in your life. I think another part of this is making that invisible work visible. Having a conversation about the work it takes to manage your home. Sometimes I think keeping a running list instead of keeping it in your brain, putting it in your notes app or your reminders app and being able to talk to your partner and say, these are the things that are happening in our house. Having these conversations also with an end goal in mind. But I think in order to really start the conversation in a productive way, you have to be able to articulate it and understand it, because I think a lot of women feel overburdened and burnt out by this stuff, but they can't even describe what it is that's happening. They couldn't even tell you why they're feeling resentful. I know I couldn't describe it at first. And so having the words to articulate what's happening is a huge step in being able to have this conversation with your partner. And then having tools to help you guide through this, whether it's Fair Play or an app. There's so many tools out there nowadays to help guide you through this and to kind of handhold you through this process. But you have to also have a willing and able partner who also equally wants to achieve happiness and this dynamic in your home. And so that you can't drag somebody kicking and screaming along. They have to be engaged in this. And so that's half the battle.
Well, that's a great lead in to tell me about the free resource you have that can help women start to have that conversation about the mental load.
Sure. I have a free guide called Making the Invisible Visible. It is a guide to the mental load conversation. And it's essentially a guide to walk you through the articulation of the mental load, walk you through preparing to have the conversation, what you need to do, the work that goes into planning for this conversation with your partner. And so it really walks you through finding that terminology and deciding how you want to approach your partner and have this conversation, because that really is the first step in making this conversation productive.
Paige, your content is so engaging, both on Instagram and on Substack. We are going to link to all of that. We're going to link to your free guide. Thank you so much. This has been a really inspiring conversation.
Thank you.